Welcome to the Way of the Taibhsear podcast. This is episode 8, Deep Ecology. Coined the phrase Deep Ecology in 1973. Deep Ecology is a philosophy of ecology and sustainable green living. In Ness's opinion, the science of ecology is a separate entity from the philosophy of ecology. While the science of ecology concerns itself with facts and figures regarding the environment, Deep Ecology examines the philosophical underpinnings of learning to live with nature. The goal of deep ecology is to formulate an ethical basis for living that is environmentally sound. Ness didn't think that organisms could be ranked in terms of their importance. He believed that humankind saw itself as the pinnacle of evolution only because it is humans who do the ranking. While we think that we are at the height of civilization and intelligence, could it possibly be that other organisms are ahead of us in this regard? Most organisms eventually find a state of equilibrium within their environment, living in harmony with their respective biospheres. But the human race tends to overwhelm and destroy the environment in which it lives, like a virus. Our religious underpinnings define humans as superior to other beings because, allegedly, we have souls. However, who is to say that animals don't? Even the word animal comes from the Latin word for soul, which is anime. We also tend to think that we are the only beings who have consciousness and self-awareness, but we're the ones who define what those phrases mean. A lot of recent research, especially work by scientists like Jane Goodall and Frans de Waal, would seem to indicate that some of the higher primates have a measure of self-awareness and consciousness. Author and humorist Douglas Adams said that humans feel themselves superior to dolphins because all dolphins do all day is swim and play in the ocean, and dolphins feel themselves superior to humans for exactly the same reason. Ness says that the right of all forms of life to live is a universal right which cannot be quantified. No single species of living being has more of this particular right to live and unfold than any other species. What this means is that humankind is not separate from nature. Our own personal philosophies should not reflect the idea that we are somehow above nature or superior to it. Taking this broader view of the world around us, we can see that sustainable living is more than just the things we do. It can be also a philosophy of life. If we learn to respect nature, maybe even to hold all living things as sacred in some way, then our lives and our actions will automatically fall in line with deep ecology principles. Deep ecology is about making a paradigm shift towards a way of life that is in harmony with nature. If we view ourselves as somehow separate from nature, then green living seems to be just another task to accomplish in our list of daily activities. But if we see ourselves as part of nature, then it becomes apparent that what we do to nature, we ultimately do to ourselves as well. Green living is about more than just a sound ecological principle. It should also be a way of life. Deep ecology is the philosophy that, if adopted, will allow us as a society to make the paradigm shift necessary to live in harmony with nature. Towards this end, the Deep Ecology platform was drafted by Arne Ness and George Sessions in 1984. The principles of deep ecology are as follows. 1. The well-being and flourishing of human and non-human life on Earth have value in themselves. These values are independent of the usefulness of the non-human world for human purposes. 2. Richness and diversity of life forms contribute to the realization of these values and are also values in themselves. 3. Humans have no right to reduce this richness and diversity except to satisfy vital needs. 4. Present human interference with the non-human world is excessive, and the situation is rapidly worsening. 5. The flourishing of human life and cultures is compatible with a substantial decrease of the human population. The flourishing of non-human life requires such a decrease. 6. Policies must therefore be changed. The changes in policies affect basic economic, technological, and ideological structures. The resulting state of affairs will be deeply different from the present. 7. The ideological change is mainly that of appreciating life quality, dwelling in situations of inherent worth, rather than adhering to an increasingly higher standard of living. There will be a profound awareness of the difference between big and great. 8. Those who subscribe to the foregoing points have an obligation, directly or indirectly, to participate in the attempt to implement the necessary changes. The principles of deep ecology are reflected in the first sacred pillar of the Order of the Taibhsear. That first sacred pillar is reverence for life and all living things. In this podcast, we will explore how deep ecology relates to the path of the Taibhsear.
The earth is our mother, we must take care of her. The earth is our mother, we must take care of her. Hey Anna ho Yana, hey Yan Yan, hey Anna ho Yana, hey Yan Yan. Her sacred ground we walk upon, with every step we take. Her sacred ground we walk upon, with every step we take. Hey Anna ho Yana, hey Yan Yan, hey Anna ho Yana, hey Yan Yan. The earth is our mother, she will take care of us. The earth is our mother, she will take care of us. Hey Anna ho Yana, hey Yan Yan, hey Anna ho Yana, hey Yan Yan. The earth is our mother, we must take care of her. The earth is our mother, we must take care of her. Hey Anna ho Yana, hey Yan Yan, hey Anna ho Yana, hey Yan Yan. Her sacred ground we walk upon, with every step we take. Her sacred ground we walk upon, with every step we take. Hey Anna ho Yana, hey Yan Yan, hey Anna ho Yana, hey Yan Yan. The earth is our mother, she will take care of us. The earth is our mother, she will take care of us. Hey Anna ho Yana, hey Yan Yan, hey Anna ho Yana, hey Yan Yan. The earth is our mother, we must take care of her. The earth is our mother, we must take care of her. Hey Anna ho Yana, hey Yan Yan, hey Anna ho Yana, hey Yan Yan.
In the 1960s, James Lovelock was a research scientist at NASA. He worked with models designed to detect signs of life on Mars. As a result of his work, he became interested in how the geobiosphere of the Earth maintained its equilibrium. Lovelock noticed that all the complex interrelated systems of the Earth work together to maintain a type of homeostasis. Lovelock's observations led him to formulate what he called the Gaia Hypothesis. Simply stated, the Gaia Hypothesis views all of life on Earth as an interlocking single organism. This organic system self-regulates and works to maintain optimum conditions for its continued survival. According to the Gaia Hypothesis, that which affects one system ultimately affects all of life on Earth. The way of the Taibhsear takes the Gaia Hypothesis one step further, in that it views the mental, physical, and spiritual health of all of humankind as a part of the geo-ecosystem that is the living planet we call Earth. If all life on Earth is interrelated, and human beings certainly are a type of life on Earth, then what happens to the rest of the planet affects us all. Taibhsears recognize that not only does the environment impact our physical health, but it also has a direct influence on our mental health and our spiritual health. While artificial, stressful, polluted environments have the power to harm, nature has the power to heal. Taibhsears realize that everything is connected to everything else. We interact with the environment, and the environment interacts with us. For those who know how to listen, the wind and the trees can sing to us. The view of a mountain range or a moonlit ocean can tell a story. The smell of the first flowers of spring can speak just as clearly as a loved one's voice can. On the other hand, a crowded, polluted city street can communicate as well. If we could make a paradigm shift to a lifestyle that makes room for nature, what would that do to our sense of well-being? This ability of nature to transform lives is the essence of the way of the Taibhsear. The earth upon which we live has been worshipped as goddess for much of the history of humankind. The link between the powers of procreation and the earth is obvious to a hunter-gatherer or an agrarian society. Food seems to magically appear from the ground each year, just as mothers bring forth new life from within their wombs. Linking this creative power would only naturally lead to the idea of the earth as goddess. Until recently, the oldest known depiction of the Mother Earth Goddess was the Venus of Willendorf. This statuette, found in Austria, depicts a nude, Rubenesque woman devoid of facial features. Her lack of facial characteristics means that she could represent any woman, anywhere. The Venus of Willendorf is believed to be around 20,000 to 25,000 years old. This would mean that goddess worship is at least 20,000 years old. This was the oldest known depiction of the goddess until fairly recently. Two statuettes similar in form and appearance to the Venus of Willendorf were recently discovered. These are known as the Venus of Tantan and the Venus of Barakat Ram. These are both controversial in that they may have actually been carved statues, or they may just be natural rocks that give the appearance of being carved due to the weathering. If it turns out to be hand-carved, these statues date somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 years old. So that means that if they truly were hand-carved into the likeness of the goddess, that goddess worship is at least 200 to 300,000 years old. If that is true, it would mean that goddess worship is almost as old as the human race. At any rate, worship of the goddess has been with us far longer than most other religious paths. In the order of the Taibhsear, the goddess symbolizes the living organism that is our planet and the mother of us all.
Come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain, flow into the ocean. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain, flow into the ocean. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain, flow into the ocean. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain, flow into the ocean. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain, flow into the ocean. We all come from the goddess, goddess, goddess. We all come from the goddess, goddess, goddess. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain, flow into the ocean. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like
is living a lifestyle that relies on renewable resources rather than on resources that will eventually be depleted. The ultimate goal of sustainability is to replace at least as many resources as we use by either recycling or replenishing the ones we've harvested. When I speak to children's groups about this topic, I have a demonstration that I use to illustrate the principle of sustainability. I pass around a cookie jar and tell each class member to take a cookie. Beforehand, I've made certain that there's only enough cookies for about half of the class. When the cookies run out, I say, "Uh-oh, we seem to have run out of cookies. How can we make sure that the rest of the class gets a cookie?" Of course, the simple answer is to put some more cookies into the jar. That's the principle of sustainability in a nutshell. Putting some cookies back into the jar for others and for future generations. A totally sustainable lifestyle would be one that relies on nothing but renewable resources. By replacing at least as much as we take out of the environment, we complete the cycle for ourselves and for future generations. In short, living sustainably means putting the principles of deep ecology to work in our everyday lives by honoring the earth, our mother, and by honoring all of the creatures with which we share the planet. This includes honoring ourselves, our children, and future generations by leaving them a planet at least as sustainable as the one we inherited from our own ancestors. Our modern lifestyle has led most of us so far away from nature that we no longer know where most of our food comes from, or where the water we drink comes from, or where our trash goes when we toss it out. I know that a lot of people will continue to think that sustainability is a nice idea, but too much trouble to bother with right now. I know that some others may make a few changes here and there when it's convenient. I suppose a little change is better than no change at all, but people who are willing to make even small changes are to be congratulated for their effort. Don't misunderstand me, but the problems we're going to be facing soon will require massive change. People who are visionary enough to be the pioneers, to make the big changes and take the big risks, must lead the way for the rest of us. I believe that Taibhsears will be at the forefront of this revolution, simply because of the nature of the way of the Taibhsear. The human race evolved in the wild, and we've only been civilized for a few centuries. There's something in us that needs nature. Even New York City, one of the most urban environments on the planet, has its own patch of nature called Central Park. Clearly, even the most urbanized among us still have a need for the wilderness. I know that the vast majority of us can't hang up civilization, move to the country, and become farmers, but I do recognize the need we all have to experience nature in some way, even if it means just adding a few houseplants in the living room, or putting on recordings of birds singing in the rainforest. It's up to you to decide how many changes you can make in your own living space and in your own lifestyle. Even small changes can add up to a big difference if enough people make them. For this week's activity, think about the following questions. Where does your drinking water come from? Do you know? Where do you get most of your food? How far is the food that you eat shipped to your local market? You can find this out by looking for labels that indicate the food's point of origin. You don't have to do an itemized list of each item in your grocery chart. The idea here is to simply gain an awareness of how far the average food item is shipped. When you ship food, you're using fossil fuels to transport it. You might want to just pick one or two items at random and see how far they were shipped to get to your table. Are there local alternative options for your food? Can you be what some people have called a localvore by eating food that only comes from within 100 miles of where you live? Where do your clothes come from? Are your clothes made of natural or synthetic fibers? Think about the home in which you live. Are there any changes that you could make to reduce your home's carbon footprint? Ponder these questions for this week. If you don't know the answer to some of them, go out and do a little research and see what you can come up with. In the Mother Grove of the Order of the Taibhsear, we have a special place set aside in our Nimitan. This place is called the Dedicant's Peace Garden. When a new dedicant is initiated into our circle, we have an initiation ceremony. At the end of the ceremony, the dedicant plants a tree of his or her own choosing in the Dedicant's Peace Garden. As our grove has grown over time, anyone can visit the Dedicant's patch and see all the trees planted by those who have taken up the path of the Taibhsear. Trees there are of various different ages, varieties, and sizes. The patch is a living microcosm of the people who have come and gone, and who remain in our circle of brothers and sisters. It is an arboreal melting pot, reflecting the diversity and history of our grove. If you wish to plant a tree yourself as you begin your walk in the wider world of the Way of the Taibhsear, I can think of no better way to create a memorial of your initiation. If you choose to plant such a tree, it will become a living symbol of your journey as a Taibhsear. As your tree grows, so will you grow in the journey of the Taibhsear's path. If you have a place where you may plant a tree, think about where you would plant it when weather comes back around to planting time. If you live in an urban setting where planting a tree outdoors would be difficult, you might try planting something indoors in a flower pot. Then when it's big enough, you can transplant it onto a friend's property or maybe into a national park. If you choose to do this activity, try to visit your tree at least once a week. What can you learn from your tree as you watch it grow and change all through its phases?
Waiting at the junction of the old straight track, holding me back. Too much road rage in the Aquarian age. Dazzle in the mirror and nothing on the radio. Forget what the lights say, I'll find another way. Cross through the circle, climb over the barrel. The tarmac's old and the pavements are narrow. Walk with the green man, take the contraflow. You don't need traffic signs to follow the ley lines. You take the high road and I'll take the one that runs underground. My cat's eyes are bonfires linking the hills of the old straight track. Waiting at the junction for the lights to change, I saw the sign. I'm not waiting for the green man, I'm not wasting my time. Go past the long man and over the hill, leading you places the road never will. Walk with the green man, take the contraflow. You don't have to wait for him to say when you can go. to wait for him to say when you can go.
Too much of our society is oriented towards bigger, better, faster, more expensive. We get caught up sometimes in having more and having it now. Sometimes we forget what we're doing and for whom we're doing it. Jesse Jackson once said, "Children want our presence and not our presence." I think that if we slow down a little, learn to experience nature and each other, to get reacquainted with our families, then this race for more stuff will loosen its hold on our lives. Maybe instead of the latest video game, our children would rather have us take them on a hike in the woods once in a while. Maybe instead of staring at the television after work, we could take our mates on a stroll through the park. Maybe instead of taking the family to the mall, we could all get together and start a backyard garden. Sustainable living is all about freeing up time and monetary resources so that there's more time for family. It's about leaving a world for our children that's in better shape than it was when we inherited it from our parents. This doesn't necessarily mean accumulating more material goods. This means creating more sustainable relationships with each other, just as much as it means creating a more sustainable environment. Ultimately, what happens to the earth happens to its inhabitants. We are all part of the many circles that make up the greater circle of our lives. And the earth is our home. What we do to the earth, we do to ourselves. In the long run, sustainable living means treating ourselves in a better way by treating our home in a better way. How many ways can you live more ecologically and more sustainably?
Dance to your shadow when it's good to believe in love. I'll lead you to the river where the light shines so pure. Dance to your shadow when it's hard to believe in love. Watch the morning come in on the land you love. If I mean, feel no carino. If I mean, feel no carino. If I mean, feel we are all. If I mean, feel no carino. Dance to your shadow when it's hard to believe in love. I'll lead you to the ocean where young birds
Modern building methods are very taxing on the environment. Cement production is one of the most energy-intensive of all industrial manufacturing processes. Cement production now accounts for over 8% of the total carbon dioxide emissions from all human activities. Cement kilns in the United States are the third largest source of dioxin contamination. Part of this is due to the fact that kiln operators are allowed to burn toxic wastes as fuel. Concrete trucks require about 500 gallons a day of highly alkaline wash to operate. This type of water is toxic to fish and other aquatic life. Steel, another predominant building material, is made from iron ore and other non-renewable resources. Steel production is energy intensive due to the amount of heat required. The fuels used to fire steel forges are also a major source of carbon dioxide and other forms of air pollution. Vinyl siding and other plastics used in the construction industry are made from non-renewable petroleum byproducts. Plastic manufacturing requires toxic chemicals and produces more toxic waste. Plastics don't breathe like natural building materials, and many plastics emit toxic fumes. Some plastics can take up to 50,000 years to deteriorate. Commercially harvested lumber products are usually treated with preservatives that are highly toxic. For example, arsenic is a component in many pressure-treated lumber products. Commercial forests harvested for lumber often use hazardous pesticides and preservatives. Irresponsible deforestation causes soil erosion, contamination of waterways from silt and pesticide runoff, and loss of biodiversity in forest ecospheres. Composite wood products such as plywood and other particulate boards are often held together with toxic compounds, which in addition to contributing to the degradation of the environment, are suspected to cause allergies and other health problems. Commercially manufactured building materials cause problems for health and the environment in all stages of their life cycle, from production and manufacturing to use in building to disposal when the buildings are raised. Additionally, long-distance transportation of building materials contributes heavily to transportation costs, not to mention the additional pollution caused by large diesel-burning engines required to support them. Clearly, our current methods of building homes are extremely taxing on the environment, but there is a better way. Cob building is the art of building homes using natural materials. Earth has been used for thousands of years as a building material, and is probably still the most common building material on Earth. The word cob doesn't refer to corn cobs. It comes from an Old English word that means a rounded lump or mass, like the word gob. Cob is basically a mixture of clay, sand, and straw. These natural building materials are often available right on the building site, so transportation costs for materials are greatly reduced or eliminated altogether. Once the walls are built by stacking the cob to build walls, they are covered with plaster to seal them. There are no forms, no brick shapes or frames. Since cob is basically the same consistency as modeling clay, it lends itself to organic shapes that are more curved and natural. An artistically designed cob home fits in well with its surroundings. These structures feel more at home and in harmony with natural landscapes. In addition to making beautiful homes, cob can also be used to build sculpture, garden walls, and outdoor ovens. Cob is literally dirt cheap since it is made from materials that come right out of the ground. Many cob homes I've visited have been built for less than $5,000, and a few have been constructed for even less than $500. Not only that, but cob building is so easy a child could do it. Ever make mud pies when you were a child? Then you've already got the basic skills to build with cob. Cob is at home in most environments. Some of the earliest structures on Earth in the Mesopotamian region were made of a type of cob. There are cob homes in Western Europe that have been continuously occupied for centuries. With a little regular maintenance, a cob home is extremely durable. A friend of mine once built a cob pottery studio in Gulf Breeze, Florida, where it survived 2 hurricanes, even when the surrounding buildings were demolished. Many cob structures in earthquake zones have demonstrated remarkable durability as well. No building system is earthquake-proof under every seismic condition, but a cob mansion in Nelson, New Zealand has survived 2 major earthquakes that destroyed the town around it. In South Yemen, in a fault zone, there are medieval cob houses that are 13 stories high. A cob building is one monolithic unit reinforced by straw, so it has no weak straight-line mortar joints, making it stronger than brick or block. Cob is also non-toxic and recyclable. It's made from natural materials that contain no toxins. Cob doesn't require any products that don't come directly from the earth. This ancient way of building doesn't contribute to deforestation, mining, or pollution. Since it's a natural form of building, it doesn't only rely on manufactured materials. Since it's made using materials directly from the building site, it doesn't use fossil fuels, transporting materials to the site. When properly constructed, cob is highly resistant to rain and humidity, even in environments such as the Pacific Northwest and the British Isles. In fact, some of the hotbeds of cob building right now in the United States are around Oregon and Washington State. Due to the fact that the walls of a cob home are about 1 or 2 feet thick, they also offer excellent thermal properties. When built with passive solar design in mind, these homes don't require extensive heating or cooling in temperate climates. Earthen walls capture the heat from sunlight in the daytime and radiate it out in the night. In my home state here in South Carolina, such homes rarely need cooling in the summertime and can be heated with a small wood stove in the wintertime. The trade-off with a cob home, of course, is that it's a very labor-intensive product. The savings come in part from getting the materials for free straight from the ground. Building it yourself could mean additional savings. You keep the money that would have gone to pay a contractor. But if you're not a hands-on, do-it-yourself type of person, cob is probably not for you. On the other hand, if you don't mind getting your hands and feet dirty, then cobbing can be a very relaxing and meditative experience. Many of the cob structures I've seen built were built by groups of people in cobbing bees, where friends and neighbors get together for a weekend or 2 to share their experiences. Since no power tools are involved in cob building, people often spontaneously break into song or conversations while cobbing together. It's a great opportunity to socialize while doing something positive for yourself and for the environment. In fact, people who've experienced cob building firsthand often talk about it in terms usually reserved for those who have undergone a religious experience. Cobbing brings people together at an instinctive and community level. Due to the fact that cob isn't labor-intensive, cob homes are usually smaller than average. This loss of space isn't really noticeable in a well-designed cob home because you can shape alcoves and shelving right into the walls to take advantage of the vertical space. Organic shapes are possible with cob, and these make it also possible to use the space more efficiently. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, housing square footage is about 4 times larger today than it was 40 years ago. And couples living alone occupy nearly half of these homes. Think about how much unused space you have in your home right now, and you might see the advantages of a smaller home. By building smaller, more space-efficient and natural buildings, not only can we save on building costs, but we also save on the energy required to heat, cool, and light extra space. Cob homes can be designed to make living more comfortable in less space. Cob homes, on the other hand, might take a little longer to build than a traditional home due to the labor-intensive and manual nature of Cob Building. But there are several factors that can come into play, including the weather, the size of your cobbing crew, and the size of your home. A crew of 6 to 12 people can build up about a foot of height on a wall per day in a cob home of about 800 square feet or less. One advantage to Cob Building is that other than applying plaster to the finished wall, there's no finish work required. Plumbing and electrical fixtures are laid inside the wall as it is built, so there's no framing to be done. There's also no need for insulation, sheetrock, taping, or finish framing. Once the final plaster coat is applied, the walls are done. I've seen a small cob cottage, about 300 square feet, built in one weekend by a dozen dedicated workers. But, on the other hand, racing to finish the home is missing the point. If you're in a hurry to build, cobbing is probably not for you. But half of the fun is building with cob is taking the time to feel the materials take shape under your hands. It's a very tactile and soothing experience, similar to sculpting with clay. If you have a ready stable of volunteers, you'll find that your group will eventually settle into a rhythm that is almost like a dance. Since there are no power tools, you can enjoy the sounds of nature while you work. Cobbing is an activity that naturally lends itself to parties, since it doesn't require a lot of skill. And who doesn't like playing in the mud? It's a chance to indulge your inner child. And if you have children of your own, they'll love it too. If you don't mind putting in a little sweat equity into building your own home, it makes a lot of sense to return to nature's most abundant, inexpensive, and healthy building material.
Hoof and horn, hoof and horn, all who die shall be reborn. Hoof and horn, hoof and horn, all who die shall be reborn.
In the way of the Taibhsear, we use the Celtic tree alphabet known as the Ogham. In this section of the podcast, we will present one character of the Ogham each week, offering information on the meaning of each letter of the Ogham alphabet, trees associated with each letter, the healing and magical properties of each tree, gods and goddesses associated with each tree and letter, and the divinatory meanings of each letter of the Ogham. Since we will be discussing medicinal uses of the plants in this segment of the podcast, please remember that herbal medicine requires caution and practice. None of the medicinal uses discussed on the Way of the Taibhsear podcast should be attempted by a novice. Some parts of the plants of the Ogham are poisonous, and people with allergies should also be aware of the potential allergic reactions to plants. If you are interested in herbal medicine, find a skilled practitioner and take lessons. Do not attempt to use medicinal plants without the supervision of an expert.
The letter N of the Ogham alphabet is represented by Nuan. This is the ash tree. Its divinatory meaning is wisdom, knowledge, and learning. The healing properties of the ash. Ground ash bark can be used to build the immune system and to purify the liver and kidneys. Cut ash leaves in the early spring and make a tea. This tea is a mild diuretic that helps with weight loss. The syrup of the flowering ash can be used as a laxative. The bark also has astringent properties and may be used to treat arthritis. An infusion made of burnt ash bark can reduce fever, treat kidney and urinary infections, and get rid of intestinal parasites. Ash bark tea may also be used to treat symptoms of malaria. Magical uses. Ash is the tree of rebirth and reincarnation. In Norse mythology, the ash is considered the world tree, or Yggdrasil. This tree was said to be the axis about which the world rotates. In Norse mythology, the Nornir, a trio of goddesses who spin the web of Veard, are said to dispense justice while sitting under an ash tree. Since ash is the world tree, or the tree of life, it has the power to unite the realms, as its roots go deep into the earth and its branches reach high into the heavens. Since ash unites this world with the other world, sleeping with an ash twig under your pillow can give you visions and clairvoyance. Druids often made their staffs of ash because of its straight grain. Since ash unites the realms, it is a symbol of balance, and the center of Druid magic lies in finding the balance between the opposing forces of chaos and order. Ash helps facilitate this. Wands of ash are particularly good for calming chaos and for magic involving transformation and transubstantiation. Ash is also good for repelling snakes. Use a branch of ash and brush the area lightly with it to keep them away. If you burn ash at Yule, you will attract prosperity in the coming year. Since the ash tree is associated with the web of Veard, this tree is also a symbol of deep and mystical self-knowledge. To know the ash is to know yourself. Gods and goddesses associated with this tree are Gwydion and the Morrigan. You've been listening to the Way of the Taibhsear podcast on International Pagan Radio, where it's all pagan all the time. This has been episode 8, Deep Ecology. Music on this episode featured The Earth is Our Mother by Libana, Mountain Light by John Fry, We All Come From the Goddess by Lindy Leela, Green Man by Magic Folk, and Our Farlin by Skilda. The Way of the Taibhsear is the official podcast of the Order of the Taibhsear. You can learn more about us at taibhsear.com. That's TAIBHSEAR.com. The Way of the Taibhsear is a podcast about Druidry and paganism as practiced by the Order of the Taibhsear. Paganism is a wide and diverse community, and we don't claim to speak for all pagans. If you'd like to see pictures of Cob Building or Natural Building, you may visit Elder Grove Seminary's website at eldergrove.org. From that website, click on the Natural Building link. You can get in touch with the Way of the Taibhsear podcast at podcast@taibhsear.com. That's podcast@taibhsear.com. The Way of the Taibhsear is sponsored by Pagan Promotions. Learn more about Pagan Promotions at paganpromotions.com. Until next time, blessings of the ancestors.